What inspired me to get into music was probably the sense that I thought that I could do it in a more powerful way than what was being heard at that time. If you think of that time that we came out, you know, the gods were, you know, like Fleetwood Mac and ABBA, and then you had disco, and it was just, felt diabolical. It felt like it lost its agenda. The punk scene in Toronto was actually more identified, more pure than the one in Manhattan, because the fact is, the so-called punk scene in New York was 2 years previous. What I mean is the Ramones, Blondie, Patti Smith had been established in the mid-70s. So when I went down to Manhattan in like 77 to play CBGB's and Max's Kansas City and all these places, I was disappointed that they were old. They weren't teenagers. And that was important, to be young, where in London, for example, Sid Vicious was an actual teenager. I was 18. The Ramones were in their mid-20s, which is ancient when you're 18. So I didn't really think, outside of maybe the Dead Boys, I didn't think that New York had a particular, and they were from Cleveland, but I didn't think the New York scene was as vibrant as the one in Toronto. Hence, the first time the Ramones played out in New York, it was in Toronto. And it was extremely vibrant. It just like it was so organic, the explosion of it in Toronto with us, and, you know, Teenage Head, the Poles, and then The Curse, The Ugly, The Truth. We were putting out The Truth. I'll tell you a fact. The first time I played at the Colonial Underground, Ronnie Hawkins was playing upstairs. That's how long ago it was. And he was complaining that they're too loud down there. And big pandemonium, fight, their bodyguards, all this, that, and the other. The next morning I woke up and I was on the cover, the whole cover of the Globe and Mail fanfare that Paul McGrath did. The whole thing was just this long. So that fed my drive to continue doing it. I thought that this is getting noticed in a big way, you know, and I felt like I was on a mission. I felt like I was on a serious mission, actually. Yeah, I mean, in my brain at the time, I wouldn't think I was trying to be shocking. I was just that disturbed, you know. It's sort of like what used to be hip is now called dysfunctional. Like if you brooded around now like Marlon Brando, people would say you need a program or something. And the 70s were way more liberal, like way more liberal. And I think what the Viletones were partly doing was, okay, can you take it this far, you know? And we seem to have, at least in a media sort of way, gotten away with it. There's a big price, though, to be paid, and that's misunderstanding and alienation. But it was worth it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Crash and Burn was really important. It happened to be coincidentally located under the Liberal Party headquarters, and it was only open for a summer. And but it was, you know, what a summer. I mean, it was, you know, it had, the Dead Boys came up to play it. And the Crash and Burn was a time where this disenfranchised youth all rallied around the fact that we could create our own thing. It was virtually impossible for us to get sort of straight gigs anywhere. And when occasionally that did happen, we'd be fired after like the second night, of course, you know. But we were creating a community that was a punk community. The Garys were inordinately important. Thank God the Garys were here in Toronto at the time. If it had been anyone else it wouldn't have worked. I think a lot of it, because of their sort of cinema experience, their knowledge of, I mean, a lot of this came out of, again, Clockwork Orange and John Waters movies and Easy Rider and things very, very sort of cool and underground. And the Garys completely understood that. And they were utterly unafraid, I mean, where the other bookers were afraid. They would think, well, of course we're going to book the Talking Heads into this little A space off of Yonge Street. Well, I got stabbed in CBGB's one time in the foot, because the stage there was kind of high, and some fan went, whoom, and I got it right in the beetle boot. And then Mary Herron, who did I Shot Andy Warhol and American Psycho, who was Gary Cormier's sister-in-law, she ended up taking me to St. Vincent's Hospital in Manhattan to get stitched up. And I didn't think twice about it. I thought, well, that's what a performance is, I didn't feel like, well, we got to find out who did that, or So there's a little example of. I mean, now it sounds completely crazy. For Viletones, what was cooler than playing in CBGB's, this might be too fine of a point, but was playing Max's Kansas City. We did a show there and look out, and there's Andy Warhol, there's Truman Capote. That's the way CBGB's was. This was like the bastion of, the Velvet Underground, the New York Dolls. I always felt that CBGB's was really overrated, man. I mean, you'd go in there and there were, Hilly had his dogs in there, and he would never take them for walks, so they would just, go to the bathroom anywhere, so you'd be walking around, stepping in it, and he never put a dime into the spot, and people think that was part of the charm, but really, man, this was raunchy. It was like you get the sense you're going to get the Black Death if you remain in here too long. And but they had a killer PA. That was about the best thing with it. But anyway, I like Max's more, but just for the lineage, that just had this sort of the oomph. The classic lineup was Freddie Pompey on guitar, who was up here from Philadelphia, Chris Haight on bass, and just laughing at the names, and Motor X on drums. A Nazi Dog, yeah. There was no political connection to that, and society got it at the time. It was just like a way of kind of thumbing your nose. Yeah, you couldn't do that now, I don't think at all. But it's weird. So I was Nazi Dog, but then I didn't want to have that name any longer after just a rethink and the death of Sid Vicious and various elements, and yeah, it was losing its thing. So, but there were occasionally writers that went, wow, thank God they're here, and not, in a way, and one of them was a guy like Lester Bangs. Lester completely understood us. But then again, there's a guy who's deeply, affected by like Lou Reed and Stooges and all that, so he got it. And same with a lot of the press we got in England, in Sounds and NME, Melody Maker. They completely got it for some reason, but there was a little bit of a, like in the date, like the regular newspapers, not the music thing oriented things, but there was a lot of apprehension and a kind of maybe a little bit of fear of what does this really all represent. And it was like it never ended. It was really very weird. Like I'm thinking of, again, Sid Vicious, mentioning him, but when you saw that whole thing unravel, you just knew what was going to happen for sure. It wasn't like the surprise of finally Kurt Cobain shooting himself. That was kind of like a surprise in a way. With Sid Vicious, you really saw it. And even when he somehow managed to get bail after Nancy's death, of course he's going to die, And I remember the Toronto Star kind of, Peter Goddard, like kind of documenting at the time, and then boom, And that was like the death blow, I felt, of the real essence of true punk was, that's when I personally think of the pureness of the movement ending there.